Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for finding and interviewing for research opportunities. My name is Debbie Kaltman Shear, and I am from the Career Center at DePaul. I'm from the Healthcare and Science Career Community. I am joined by my colleagues Sabrina and Margie. We have a couple of different workshops in our interviewing series designed to help you break down some of the common interview questions and prepare for your interviews. Um, there's going to be a lot of text in this presentation, but we are going to share it with you. We will share both the presentation and the video recording. So as long as you have registered for the event in Handshake, we'll be able to send that to you either today or early next week. We'll have some time for a Q&A at the end, but if you have questions throughout, please put them in the chat. If you would like to ask a question anonymously, you can send it to me, you can send it to Margie, or you can send it to Sabrina, and we will ask it on your behalf. If you're able to, please keep your cameras on. We would love to see you. If you can stay muted while we're presenting, that would be great, just so we can keep out any background noise. And anything else that I forgot? All right, well, with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague Sabrina, who's going to kick us off.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina. I am also part of the Healthcare and Science Career Community at the DePaul Career Center. So to begin our event today, I will be highlighting the different ways to find research opportunities. So there are various on and off campus experiences that you all can get involved in. So within DePaul on campus, finding research positions, it's all about networking. And most of the positions are not advertised on websites. So you will need to develop connections to help you discover and explore what's out there. So some tips that we have for you is to talk to your professors. First of all, in your classes, try to learn more about the research that they're doing. See if it connects to some of your interests that you might have and some of the research goals that you have for yourself. Another thing to consider is to read more and do more research on your own. On the College of Science and Health faculty and staff webpage, search the faculty bios that are online, make note of interesting research projects, read the summaries of recent papers or presentations that the staff professionals might have on their faculty bios. And then another thing to consider is to contact lab managers and grad students that you might know or you might find online, as they often do play a key role in hiring research positions on campus. And this is a sample outreach email. So in networking, especially for research positions, the first step is to make that initial outreach, whether you have a class with a professor or not, because you can still reach out to professors even though you haven't had a class with them if they have projects or research labs that are interesting to you. And so this sample email is what that contact can look like. So some things to keep in mind are to be professional and be respectful. Use their correct titles. If it's professor or doctor in this example, include your first and last name, introduce yourself a little bit, and then show what you know, show what your interests are. Be specific about what you know about their research. And how you want to be involved and how you want to contribute. And then finally, be considerate of their time. They are busy working professionals, so keep in mind that their response might come a little late, so be patient. And it's all right to send a follow-up email after a week. And now these are some of the DePaul specific research opportunities that give students the chance to have that in-depth knowledge, gain hands-on experience, and these opportunities do provide potential funding. And in this list, each opportunity is hyperlinked to a website, a web link where you can learn more about each program. We won't go over each one specifically during this presentation, but again, this presentation will be emailed to everybody that's registered so that you can look at this and do the research on your own time. Just to read off a few, the Undergraduate Research Assistant Program, the Dean's Undergraduate Fellowship, the Graduate Research Fund, and the DUOS Scholarship. So again, they provide experience, and some of these do provide funding. So it's a great way to gain that hands-on experience on campus. And finally, there are ways to get connected externally outside of DePaul, at research labs, at corporations, and at other universities. So again, this list is just a short idea of ways and places that you can find opportunities, whether they're volunteering, internship, or job positions to gain that research experience. And I would like to hand over from here the presentation again to Debbie. And before we move on to our next section, Debbie is our employer engagement specialist who has connected and collaborated with a few of these employers and organizations. So if you do have anything that you would like to add, Debbie, please feel free to do so at this point.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sabrina. What I would add is, be proactive in reaching out. If you see that there's an info session for an organization that you're interested in, definitely sign up. Most of them are still virtual, and companies are still doing that and recruiting. Reach out on Handshake, reach out on LinkedIn, and we'll talk a little bit later at the end of the presentation about some ways that we can also help you with your networking. So Sabrina, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So once you've found a research opportunity, here we have some advice on how to interview and the different types of interview questions. Again, there's going to be a lot of text coming at us. I'm not going to go through all of it. There's some really great examples that we've put together. And again, we'll send this to you so that you can review it in more detail later. Next slide, please. We also have a number of fantastic resources in our career library, and so we'll link these in the chat as well. And some of these will go into a little bit more detail. So the first one is our interview basics. So for most roles or positions, there's going to be a sequence. You will probably have multiple different interviews. Every job and every company is different, so it might look a little different, but these are the most common. So you would probably in the first round have a phone screening or a video screening, usually with an HR person if it's a bigger company, maybe with a hiring manager if it's smaller. And then in subsequent rounds, you would have a face-to-face or video-to-video interview. You might have to do a presentation. Depending on the field, if you're going into something in consulting, you might have a case or a problem to do. If it's a more technical field, you might have to do some sort of tech problem to show off your skills. Next slide, please. And again, we can't predict every kind of question, but these are the most common. We also have a handout with our most common interview questions. And if you can prepare for each type of these questions, this can help you to prepare for the interview. We're going to look at qualification questions, behavioral questions, and scenarios. So next slide, please. I'm sure we can go back one. That's okay, keep going to the next one. Actually, next slide. Okay, so in the first category, one of the most common types of questions you might receive is, tell me about yourself. It's often the first question, kind of designed to break the ice, get to know you. And you want it's very open-ended, obviously, but you don't want to tell your entire career story or your entire life story. You want to present your qualifications and be succinct. So in this example, you might explain, I'm a sophomore at DePaul, I'm majoring in biological sciences, and I'm interested in researching the human body and specifically how environmental factors may impact body systems and functioning, and talk about some of your research experience, your classroom experience, and then what you hope to get out of this position. I hope to continue applying the scientific method and ethical research practices in important research. Next slide. You might also have a question about your greatest strengths, your greatest skills, and this is an opportunity to talk about your skills. We talk a lot about skills here in the Career Center. We have a whole series that we call Skills Lab, where you can learn new skills. Great time to learn skills during the pandemic when you're home a little bit more. And this is an opportunity to talk about technical skills, right? Something like using specific research equipment or using Adobe. And then also soft skills like communication or teamwork or leadership. So you might talk about being a problem solver, and you want to talk about kind of the outcomes. In every job I've had, I've shown the ability to quickly analyze the issue, et cetera. In my previous job, and this sounds like it was a restaurant or a delivery position, we were consistently getting negative reviews from customers on delivery time. So I brainstormed with my coworkers to come up with ways to improve the order fulfillment process. And many of the changes we suggested were implemented, and our reviews improved dramatically. So you've talked about a soft skill. You're talking about leadership, you're talking about problem solving, collaboration, and you're talking about the impact that you made. You brainstorm ideas, you improve the fulfillment process, and your customer reviews increased. Next slide. You might be asked why you're interested in the position. We're not going to go through this in detail, but you want to ensure that you have a really clear understanding of the role and why, your enthusiasm, how you're perfect for the company, and include some of your strengths as well. Next slide. So then we also are moving into behavioral questions. This is going to be, tell me about a time when you ... It's an opportunity to talk about previous experiences, class projects, personal stories, and often there's a focus on more of the soft skills like problem solving or conflict resolution, communication, leadership, etc. Next slide, please. So you might have a question like this, it's very common. Tell me about a time when you had multiple responsibilities. How did you manage? An employer is asking you this because the ability to multitask and kind of handle the pressure of the job is really important, regardless of what your position is. We know that DePaul students manage a lot of different responsibilities in and out of the classroom and in and out of school. So this is an opportunity for you to showcase that. We recommend that you keep your story short, you keep it positive, upbeat, and include the outcome. So this might sound very familiar to you, right? Last quarter, I managed my schoolwork. I volunteered as a middle school science tutor. I was a research assistant for a chem lab. I shadowed a pediatrician once a week. And I managed this by mapping my schedule with different time blocks on my calendar to organize responsibilities. I color coded them. I had dedicated time for study sessions, for office hours. I used to-do lists to keep track of all my different tasks and my deadlines. And even though I was really busy, I did well in my classes. This was my GPA, and I gained valuable work experience as a research assistant, as a science tutor, and doing the shadowing. Next slide, please. You might be asked about the time that you worked as part of a team, and you can talk about your teamwork experience, your interpersonal skills. Again, you can use a class project. Next slide, please. You might be asked about how you handle conflict. It happens to everyone, and that's not a bad thing. It's more about how You deal with it, and the employer is trying to assess your emotional maturity and your interpersonal skills. Next slide, please. And then finally, we have scenario questions. So you're given a hypothetical and you're asked what you would do. And this way, the interviewer can see how you think and how you might respond to some realistic situations. They might be asking you this because something like this has actually happened, or just because it's a pretty common scenario. Next slide, please. Okay, so how would you handle a disagreement with a lead researcher? With this question, right, the interview wants to know how you handle conflict, compatibility, get a sense of your personality. So you might answer, by saying something like, well, if I disagreed, I would very calmly, professionally, openly communicate my ideas to the team, and I would explain my reasoning based on knowledge and understanding. However, if the lead researcher still disagreed with me, then I would agree to follow their idea or plan because they are the lead researcher and they are in charge. And I believe that their decisions have the best interests of the whole team and our entire research project and lab in mind. You might be asked about something specific, a specific duty. So maybe in this position, you would have to conduct a literature search, and you'll be asked what that process might look like. Next slide. So after you've been asked questions, there will probably also be a time when the interviewer will ask, okay, what questions do you have for me? And asking some meaningful questions is really, really important. It makes it a great learning experience. It gives you some insights to determine if this is right for you. Remember that an interview is a two-way street. They're seeing if you fit in with their company, and you're seeing if this fits based on your values and your interests as well. It also shows that you're really thoughtful, that you have prepared for the interview. So you should have questions prepared. And there are 4 different times or types of questions. We'll go through each type. And again, we also have a fantastic handout that goes into this in more detail. Margie or Sabrina, if you can link that in the chat, please, that would be awesome. Next slide, please. All right, so first you might ask a role specific question about this position. What does success look like in this position? How is it measured? This helps you think about how you would be able to achieve success in this role. What are some of the biggest challenges in this role? Or what are the most important qualities that might contribute to success? Those are specific to the position. You might also ask a question about industry trends. Data is an important issue across healthcare. Is this a trend, that has impacted this role, and how so? Excuse me. And a question that you really can ask across any interview at this point, how has the transition of many roles from in-person to remote impacted this team and this position? How has the pandemic work environment impacted your company? You can really ask that about anything at this point. Next slide, please. Then you can ask company specific questions, like where is this organization going to be headed in 5 years? Maybe there's a strategic plan, maybe there's new leadership coming in. It's a good time to get a sense of what is happening on a bigger scale. And again, if that fits with what you're looking for. And then finally, you might ask a tactical question. Hopefully the interviewer will go over this unprompted, but if they don't, you can ask, what are the next steps? What is the time frame? When can I expect to hear back? When do you hope to have the position filled? Or when do you hope to have the position start? Just so that you know what is happening. Next slide, please. As you prepare for your interview, you might come up with some questions. So definitely write them down as you're learning a little bit more about the company. And these are also a couple ways that you can prepare those questions by reading the job description carefully and seeing, what's unclear. By reviewing the website of the company, looking at their mission, looking at their products. I would add to that, review their social media as well, and see if there's anything that sparks questions. Take a look. Most companies have a career section on their website, so see what you can learn from that and any questions. And then take a look at any journals, websites, professional organizations to see what questions you have about the industry. Next slide. And then finally, there are a few questions that we want to discourage you from asking. You want to ask thoughtful questions. You don't want to ask yes or no questions or anything that you could really easily find on the company's website. You also don't want to stump the interviewer. You don't want to ask them a question that's super complicated and might make them feel uncomfortable for not knowing. And then during the interview, you don't want to ask specific questions about salary or benefits. Later on in the process, you'll have time to talk about this and to negotiate. We have more information on negotiating as well, but during the interview, you want to focus on your skills and your experience and gaining information about the company. I am going to turn it over to Margie to talk a little bit more about preparing for your interview. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Margie. I'm the Director of Career Education, the person throwing all those links in the chat. So if you haven't checked those out, I've linked to the Career Library and then a couple other listings of research opportunities. One thing I wanted to add in advance of continuing to talk about the interview is the importance of networking and getting your materials directly to hiring managers. What I've seen is I've seen a lot of students kind of get their application into a pipeline and then consider the job done, right? That's when I get the interview. That's really not the case, considering that at least pre-pandemic, most opportunities got over 250 applications, and only 30% of those applications were reviewed. So there's two things you need to think about, and we do have resources specifically around this. You want to think about how you're navigating the applicant tracking system that they may or may not be using. So keywords, immediacy, things like that are under resume. But you also want to think about when you get your application into a portal, are you also reaching out to someone at that company or that institution and getting your application immediately into their hands? So for example, and this is what Sabrina was talking about in terms of a lot of unlisted opportunities at DePaul. If you applied for a research position at the University of Chicago, you would want to do a little bit of labor around getting your materials directly in front of the person who oversees that program. So most institutions have a really complicated HR portal where all those applications sit until the person who's hiring gets access to them. And for example, at DePaul, I don't see applications for jobs that I'm posting. I only see whatever my HR representative sends over when they send it over. So that's why it's really a pro tip, and it's something we talk about a lot, which is figuring out a way to send an email with your resume and cover letter attached, saying something like, you know, dear professor, I recently submitted my application for this opportunity through the hiring portal. I just thought I'd share my application materials directly with you. Thanks for your time. Like, that's it. You're then navigating around the applicant tracking system, in addition to making sure you're going to make it through that tracking system as well by managing your keywords and creating immediacy in your resume. But in terms of preparing for the interview, the number one piece of advice I would have for you is to get an appointment in the Career Center and do a mock interview. This is a muscle. No one is inherently great at interviewing. It's all about homework. And for those of you here, I would assume most of you are pretty good at research. That's about 80% of how you prepare for an interview. You sit down, you do the homework, you research the person you're going to talk to. You research who are they on LinkedIn, what's their brand. You research the role, you research the institution, you research the research that they're doing and the words that they're using to describe that, because you want to figure out, what do they think is important for me to bring to the table? Sometimes it's pretty clear in the job posting. Most of the time it's not, meaning that they're kind of recycling their job postings, right? And it'll say like, maybe there's a generic research opportunity, but it doesn't say anything about the exact lab you're assigned to. There's a lot of labor involved in that research. And what I'll say is we can help you do that. Like you could set up a mock interview with us where part of the labor that we do with you is figuring out, okay, who's in the room? What are the questions they might ask? The other piece of this is then scripting and talking about the performance aspect of it. So for me, I divided into research, scripting, and then performance. And that's the sad reality that performance is part of this. I think that there's a world where this will shift a little bit, but right now, even on a video interview, you have to think about your nonverbal communication. And you have to be ready to present your best and most authentic self. And that's the thing I think that can be challenging for people. But we do that homework with you. So that's really why, like, I think our handouts have a lot of great content in them, but I think the practice part of it is important because that's the muscle you're building. But this list is great. Obviously going into matching your strengths with the job posting, researching, practicing, thinking about your appearance. And I don't mean that in a biased way. I mean, just thinking about what's the light in the room that I'm going to be doing this in, particularly because we're doing video interviews. Like, do I have a blurred background? Is that better for me than having my space? And setting it up. And if you have a laptop, I'm always really making sure that the camera has the appropriate angle on me for these interviews as well. In the normal times, we would say, come into the Career Center. We have a space for you to do this in. And we are hoping once we're back on campus, we'll be able to offer that. We do also have a career closet where it's all mostly brand new clothing that folks can keep and choose to use for interviews. If you're kind of curious about dress code, err on the side of conservative, but at the same time, I typically recommend students dig into those employers' social media pages. During normal times, you'd see people in offices. Things are a little bit different now. So, I'm always a big fan of work on top, party on the bottom, now that we're in Zoom. As long as that's something that, think about how you're representing yourself. Think about how you can make it a conversation. The only way to make an interview a conversation and to feel like this natural feeling that you want to have is by practicing and by scripting. And then of course you're going to follow up with a note. Can you go to the next slide, Sabrina? So this gets into like the nitty gritty around this. So I don't want to be too repetitive, but I'll quickly go through really thinking through skills. And when I'm scripting an interview with someone, every single answer I give should come back to the same thesis statement. So I want to have a brand statement about me. This is what makes me uniquely qualified. You want to think about what's a distinction. So think of it this way. If you're applying for a research opportunity at the University of Chicago, you're probably competing against University of Chicago students. What makes you a better candidate than those students? And that's going to be very individual for different people. So just as an example, maybe you're a bio major, but you also have this passion for photography. That's a distinction that you could pitch as being relevant to an experience. Like, I'm a very visual person. So when it comes to data analysis, this is a space I really enjoy, and you would individualize how you're distinctive based on any number of things, your interests, particularly hybrid interests that kind of make you a little bit different than the other candidates, culture, background. But basically your job is storytelling. Your job is to be able to think through, how is this distinction a positive? And again, there's no one way to do it. There's a million ways to do it, but it's a lot. And I'll tell you what, it is hard to do for yourself because we're too kind of in our heads about who we are. It's a lot easier for us to help you do that. So really my whole pitch is the one-on-one advising that we offer, because that is how you can get the most custom advice and even talk through. But you might have a good friend who you could say to them, help me figure out what makes me different and better candidate than other folks that I might be competing against. But every single time you answer one of the questions that Debbie went through, so tell me about yourself. You're never just going to tell them about yourself. You're going to come into, let's say I'm a DePaul senior, I'm majoring in astrophysics, and I'm so interested in this job because of this. right? Or I'm so qualified for this job because of this. You're going to go beyond just their questions, but not in a lengthy way. And you are going to kind of prove the point that you're starting with every single time. I can't say enough about happy verbs. I don't think this is on one of our decks, but it's really natural and compelling to use happy verbs like I enjoy this. Like the difference between I'm good at this and I like doing this or I enjoy this is huge from a like psychologically manipulative space, right? Like if you say I'm good at this, I might be like, prove it. But if you say I enjoy doing this, I'm not going to argue with you about it. I'm going to be like, oh, they like doing it. There's something compelling about that. But in terms of researching the company, this is a labor of love. Every opportunity is going to be a little bit different. Every lab is going to be a little bit different. But if anybody's going to be good at this, I would hope it's this population of students who are making research part of what they do. Like I said, I get into the academic department. I get into the publications the folks have, the people that the researchers have published. I get into their LinkedIn profile. I get into what are the names of the classes they teach. I just like to know as much as possible so that, I mean, once you have the interview, it is yours for the taking. It's getting the interview that's the hardest part, which is why we have all these other like hustle pro tips that we recommend. But that research is really important. And that's the 2 Deloitte links I put in there. That's really extra labor, but it can pay off sometimes in terms of really being able to speak to trends. And, you know, so for example, some of that research might be parlayed into a question in the interview about, you know, I know since COVID happened, there's still pharmaceuticals are still getting approved, but I saw in Deloitte that, and you just sound like someone who's ready to work and ready to be an active part of that team. And that's where the performance then comes in is the next important part. Because it's one thing to sound like that. It's another thing to project that. Can you go to the next slide, Sabrina? Thank you. So performance and practice. Usually what I'll tell folks is you kind of have a sense of who you are in the room, right? Sometimes like me, I'm a here. When I interview, I have to bring it up because I'd rather live down here where I'm like, I'm tired all the time. I'm just a real low key person. So when I do an interview, I bump it up. When I'm working with students who are here, they're just like really excited. That's just who they are. We bring it down a little. We get in the middle of who our best selves are and we perform in that space. That is not easy to do without practice. And what you'll observe is, and it will make you crazy, every single interview you do, you'll be like, oh, so much better this time than last time. Like, I wanted that one more, but this one I was better at because I just did one and I was good and ready to go. So I think the practice piece is really important. I have worked with people who did practice for the phone screening and then did a different set of practice for the second round because it's different enough that it warrants multiple practice sessions. And you can do this with trusted friends, but it's really good to do that. And that's where I script, and you'll know more about your own learning style. I only learn by reading. I am not an auditory processor. So I cannot prepare actually it's more writing where I learn. The reading and the writing together is how I learn. So I have to script. The good news about a script, some folks I work with are like, but what if I sound like a robot, right? Because I've scripted it. Well, unless you have a photographic memory, that's not going to happen. Like you're going to talk the way you normally talk. You'll just have these chunks of language to use, this word choice that you worked on to talk about who you are. And the benefit is your answers will be shorter. This is my favorite prep piece in an interview. I think it's important to script your answers so they're no longer than 2 to 3 minutes. Because that you're just answering a simple question. And I think the biggest mistake we make when we don't script is a 6-minute answer that ends with a thud, right? I like to end when I'm scripting. I like to end every answer with a happy statement, a happy verb statement where I go, tell me about your experience doing da, 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 da. I might say like, well, I developed this project where we did this. I worked with a team that did this. And then I end with, I really enjoyed managing multiple priorities, or I really enjoyed the collaborative aspect of that project. And then I end with a statement that makes a claim about me, and it provides clear punctuation for the person interviewing me. So they're having an easy time of knowing when I'm stopping and starting. And their comfort is part of this too. You want them to enjoy the conversation. Oh, Debbie, that happened to me too. Debbie just put in the chat, choose an interview with a candidate, answer, tell me about yourself for 35 minutes. I can beat that. I was part of an interview team that asked, so like, what drew you to this role? And this was an administrative role in a university art department. And this person said, it all started in 7th grade. This person was like mid 50s, and we all leaned back and we were like, okay, now we're ready for a ride. And it made no sense. It was just like, I love poetry. It was wild. So yeah, the short answers, they don't come easy, particularly for ramblers like me. Like I could talk to a brick wall for 12 hours. I have to script a short answer. And then in terms of planning your clothing, I wish we didn't have to talk about this. I just feel like the world is changing, but I think make yourself feel good. That's really my advice about planning your clothing. I personally, particularly because I'm middle-aged, I have 2 kids, even just putting on a dumb statement necklace, I'm like, boom, look at me, fashion model, ready to go. Like, so whatever makes you feel good. I actually interviewed for a job once, 8.5 months pregnant. And I very intentionally got a blowout on my hair. And I was like, now they won't even notice that I'm 8.5 months pregnant because my hair looks so smooth and good. And I just went in feeling really powerful. So really think about that. You want to feel good. You want to feel confident about who you are. I don't want to police people's clothing. I don't want to police people's bodies. I just think it's more important to feel good about who you are. And, part of this is another pro tip. If you're doing a phone interview versus a video interview, you're going to do a better job with your nonverbal communication if you're looking in a mirror. That sounds insane, but there's this eye contact you make. And I don't know if you guys do they still make America's Next Top Model, Debbie? I don't know if you ever hear Tyra Banks talking about smiles. I like to talk about smears. You hear a smile when you're doing that eye contact with yourself in the mirror. Like, I think otherwise you're like, if you're just on a phone and you're not looking at anything, you can get it's a lot better to try and at least make eye contact with yourself in a mirror during a phone appointment. I know that's minutia. It's just a fun tip. Do you want to go to the next slide, Sabrina? In the real times, definitely bring an extra copy of your resume. It's not necessarily important for a phone or Zoom interview. I do very much love, and I do this even in a Zoom interview, I always have a pen in my hand and a piece of paper that I'm taking notes on, because for me, that fidget that I'm doing helps me stay relaxed. So you'll know better what's best for you, but you can absolutely, in the real time when you're in person, say, I just brought a notepad because I'm going to take notes during our conversation. Like, that is not inappropriate. That's 100% fine for you to do. I like doing that because it helps me relax. In some ways, it should help me recall the conversation, but really more than anything, it just helps me relax. Obviously, you'll want to be prompt. I don't need to say that. You guys are science folks. You don't need to, that you need to be at the place at the right time. I do always bring my cute shoes in a bag. So that's advice for cute shoe people. If you're in real time, bring your cute shoes in the bag so that it's easier for you to move around quickly. This advice is so outdated now because you guys are all trapped in the internet. Do you want to go to the next slide, Sabrina? This is hard for me, the listening piece of it. I have to practice this. That's part of the practice. You don't want to just jump and wait for the next question because you've got it ready to go. You want to sit back and you want to be prepared to say, like, if maybe there's a tangent where they say, oh, that reminds me, I was going to ask you about ... because of this. You just want to be able to be part of that conversation. But what I'm saying about the relaxation thing, that is not going to come naturally for most people. So I don't want you to feel like, oh, I have to, like, I used to work with someone who would take like a Benadryl before doing an interview because they were so stressed out. But the practice is really the best way to do that, and the scripting and the over preparing. Yeah, have your questions prepared for sure. Thank them at the end. Obviously follow up with a note. I had a student of mine bring pre-written thank you notes to all her interviews. And I was like, you look insane. Like, do not do this because it's not earnest. You're like, you end the interview and you hand them a thank you note. That's wild. Don't do that. And don't send a personal one it's personal. Don't send a paper one anymore. Just shoot off an email real quick to either a team or one person. Thanks so much for your time. I'm really excited. I particularly like learning about this part of it. Best. That's it. That's just good manners now. You don't really have to reiterate why you're the best person. You can, but just keep it short and sweet. That's really my advice for that. Is there another slide or is that all of those? Yeah, look at all of our other handouts. Debbie, do you want me to, should we ask if there's questions now? You want me to pass it over to you?
Actually, I'm gonna pass it back to Sabrina for a quick minute.
Okay, so before we jump into the Q&A, if you do have those ready, just make sure that you can send them in the chat or write them down. You can send them privately to me, Margie, or Debbie, and then we'll have space at the end to answer any questions that you guys might have. I want to jump in right now before we end to kind of highlight some of the services and resources that we have at the Career Center for you, even virtually. We have so many things that are available to all of you online. So this is an example. All of the handouts and slides that we were going through in this presentation were all from our career library. And these are some of the additional resources that you can access. I'll show a link to it later as well. But again, like mastering the video interview, asking great questions, and dressing for success. We do have PDF handouts that you can download and access at home. So I am going to leave this presentation and share screen so that the things that I'm talking about here, you can see where to find them and where to access them on our Career Center's webpage. So starting from the beginning, it's at careercenter.depaul.edu. We will also send a follow-up email after this event to all registered students so that you have access to these quick links. So first thing that I wanted to highlight is under career advising. We have so many different options for meeting with the Career Center. First, we have virtual office and drop-in coaching. These are our hours, and you can connect with a peer career coach. They review resumes and cover letters, provide general career guidance, answer any questions that you might have. And you can do this without scheduling an appointment. You just drop in and then you'll be connected with someone. Another resource we have is resume reviews that you can go submit your resume online. There's a quick Google form right here that you just fill out, say what you want to focus in the resume review, and then a peer career coach will send you written feedback on how to continue working on your resume. And finally, scheduling an appointment, whether virtual or on the phone, with a career community advisor. And when scheduling an appointment, you choose the career community representative that you want to connect with. So we are part of the healthcare and science career community. And we also have other career community advisors that you can connect with, whether it's exploring careers and interests, business, entrepreneurship and consulting, education, nonprofit and government, et cetera, et cetera. So down here too. So whatever you're interested in, there is a team that's ready to meet with you. Again, this is where you would schedule for a mock interview so that we can prepare questions that are geared specifically to the industries and careers that you're interested in. And if you're interested in joining a career community, we do have bi-weekly newsletters that we do send that highlights recent news, tips, upcoming events, jobs, and internship postings. And if you do opt into the healthcare and science career community, it is all relevant to this industry and this field. Debbie, if you could share the links to this in the chat.
Can you send me that link? Actually, I'm having trouble locating that one.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Let
Thank
me I'll drop this in the chat real quick.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries.
The newsletters that come out for the career communities come out every 2 weeks, and they're primarily jobs and opportunities. So they're not heavy in terms of a ton of content. They're really more timely events and opportunities. So I think it's a great service. A lot of students don't know that this exists. And it is across the entire healthcare and science community. You can opt into multiple communities as well and get those lists bi-weekly. If you're someone who's kind of like a hybrid person who's interested in maybe healthcare and technology, those are two different communities that you could get intersectional information from.
For sure. Thank you, Margie, for jumping in. Next is highlighting Handshake. So this is the career platform that we use at the Career Center, where you can find job postings, internship postings. You can filter your search based on your industry, whatever you're interested in. And so this is something that you have access to as DePaul students. The first thing, even without searching anything for me, is research specialist. So very timely for the event that we're doing. This is also how you can access and find out what events are coming up within the Career Center. So you can filter to, for example, this month. Something that I wanted to mention is next week, we do have a skills lab, kind of related to this event, on city training and research careers. And this is a great event, a great opportunity, again, to learn more about how you can get involved in research, how that city training, different types of city training can be beneficial to your resume and to your potential research career. So that's something that I wanted to highlight. And this is our Alumni Sharing Knowledge Network, or ASK Network. This is a virtual networking platform to connect with DePaul alumni and professionals who have opted into the service to share their experiences and their knowledge and their insights with DePaul students who are maybe exploring different career paths and wanting to learn more about the careers that they might potentially be interested in. And this network really is a great space of community where every alum that I've connected with on this service has always been really excited to connect and to talk with students. So it's always a great opportunity. If you search for specific keywords, you can chat with them. If they're online at the moment, you can chat with them in real time just to ask them questions on their work, on insights that they may have on professional or personal development. So this is, again, another resource that we have at the Career Center that would be great for you guys to sign up for and see how it can be great for networking. And finally, this is our career library. This is, again, where a lot of those handouts from this presentation came from. And again, you have access to this at home while we're remote, so you can download a lot of these files onto your own devices. We also have blog posts and short career videos on different tips, like quick resume tips. And the topics that we highlight in this career library is quite extensive. We have from resumes and cover letters to, again, interviewing, networking, gaining experience, and all the way down to exploration and graduate school or professional school preparations. So we have a lot here for you, and it's all accessible to you, all from home. So I'm going to flip back here. Again, these links are here just in case. They're on the presentation. And so if you do lose them, you will have this presentation to access them again. This slide, again, just highlights our career library, how it focuses on different career topics and professional development topics. There is, again, a slide for joining a career community, how it can be beneficial, the different communities that we have here. And again, as Margie was saying, it doesn't matter what your major is. This is more so for what your interests are in the future for your career after graduating. And you might find yourself teetering between a few of these or all of these. I really love the exploration, healthcare and science, and education, just because for me, that's where I am in my own professional development journey. So I receive these specific newsletters. You can get one, all, or none of these, depending on where you're at. And again, that's skills labs. These are great for learning about different hard and technical skills that are really sought out by employers. And this is a program that has come about since the Career Center has shifted virtually. So it is a great way to learn about skills that you can build even while you're at home, even while we're remote. So I really recommend that if you look through the events page on Handshake and you find a skill that you're really interested in learning more about, to sign up, to register, and attend. And now I would like to thank all of you again for coming. We would like to open up the floor to a Q&A if anybody has any questions about anything we mentioned in our whole presentation. I'm going to stop sharing as well.
While you guys decide if you have a question, I wanted to add one thing we didn't talk about was the part of the application where they ask what your desired salary is. I strongly recommend doing your best to not answer that question if possible. This is less true for research opportunities because it's going to be posted, right? Typically. But if as you're doing this search, if you come into situations, particularly for full-time roles that are not posted, I think it's important to do the research and to ask that question back. If you're asked that in a screener, what your required salary would be in a screen call, you would say something like, I was actually going to ask you that question, what the range was. This will not be super common for the research roles you guys are applying to, but I just wanted to add it. But I do see a question about the outcome of the interview. Is this Debbie's interview?
Oh, no. It's yours. The outcome of the interview when you had your blowout.
Oh, I got the job, of course. And I, in fact, offered to induce labor early if it was better for their timeline. So, I played all the cards. Of course, I got the job. It was the blowout. So.
Yeah, is fantastic. But I think that is a great point. Whatever makes you feel best within kind of a professional bounds, but what makes you feel really good.
I like that caveat there. I appreciate that, Debbie. Within bounds. I need that.
Yes.
I was going to ask about the exploration community. What is that? Is that just general kind of, what kind of emails am I opting into?
Well, exploration's really interesting at DePaul because you might be, we see these career journeys as cyclical. So exploring is great for people who are still really contemplating what they want to do. Maybe they're in multiple communities and this is just a space for that conversation. Also pivoters benefit. So they send fewer newsletters because they're not sending jobs and opportunities. They're really promoting some of their specific events around pivoting or around career conversations. If you're ever just making an appointment, clicking on the exploration community gets you access to a team of folks who answer every kind of question. They're really kind of the other category. And particularly the staff advisor, Ed Childs, he is the dad of the Career Center. This is how I describe him. I think Sabrina would agree.
He's like the funny uncle.
The fun uncle is how I often
Funkle.
describe
Yeah, he's definitely the Funkle. He will, he's more than happy to talk to you about getting a job in accounting or opening up a bar in Costa Rica. He's just one of the most probably nurturing career advisors we have. So like when I look at his appointments, he sees students from every major who are doing everything from interviewing to asking exploration questions to et cetera. So like sometimes I think it's important to really think through style. Like when you go into an advising session, I'm like probably the bossiest advisor of all the advisors. I'm very bossy. I like telling people what to do. Some people don't like that, right? They like a more laid back approach. Ed and I are both on the high energy side. He's just the more laid back of the bossy. He's not going to boss you around, but he is going to give you 1,000 things that you might want to think about. when you guys meet with an advisor, you might vibe with them really well. But if you want something, a different style, I want you to feel like you can shop around and get a different style. I make some people panic because I'm just like, this. And then I say, you should talk to Ed, or you should talk to Lauren, or you should talk to Jen. We all have a very different kind of approach. So it really isn't a one size fits all. Obviously, they have technical expertise in a lot of their industries. Like Sabrina's been answering the same questions for the last is it almost 2 years now, Sabrina?
I think like over a year.
Yeah. So she's got deep knowledge in this healthcare and science realm. But that's where I think the exploration community is actually a really great opportunity, because there are those folks who are kind of they can answer everybody's question, and they all have a different style. Amy, who's the exploration ambassador, is the opposite of Ed. Like, they couldn't be more different people as far as how they work. But it's kind of like if you've ever used a writing center. I think we think you go into a writing center and you just get the help you get. It's like, no, everybody's got a really different style with how they help. So we want to make sure you know that you have a lot of options, and that you can talk to any of these advisors and their ambassadors, and they're all going to bring a different vibe and a different approach.
All right, we can continue the Q&A. I'm just going to send a little wrap-up poll that we have just to gain some of your feedback, how this event has been for all of you. So feel free to do that, while if you have any questions, also feel free to continue.
Yeah, we'd love more questions. Debbie, is that your construction?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm gonna mute. Yeah, thankfully it's been quiet through this event. So just now.
I think the pandemic happened at the perfect time, because my dog is 12 years old and he's no longer a hassle. He don't even know he's here.
What kind of dog is he?
He's a Coonhound Shepherd mix. The goodest boy on the planet. He just turned 12. He got a McDonald's cheeseburger for his birthday.
Nice. We have time for maybe one more question. Anything else about interviewing or career related anything?
If it's possible, I can ask a question unless you want me to put it in the Q&A.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. So I'm at a weird stage where I'm just completing my one of my current degree program, but I'm taking some additional classes for licensure. But in addition, I'm also applying to PhD programs this upcoming December. And research is really everything then, obviously. But I don't want to lose momentum on the licensure part. And this is all very new territory. And so I just kind of want to reiterate what I think was the message, just so I understand it. The sort of best next steps for me after attending this today is to sort of make a appointment and try and sit down with whoever will have me. But to kind of then figure out a game plan with you, because as everyone was talking, I do get the sense that the narrative is similar, but everyone does have really good advice. And so to better the outcome in my future, I would like more brains than just mine when figuring this out, because this is really new territory. And so so it's just making an appointment and then kind of going from there to figure out all the different pieces that still need to get connected, or sort of with interview practicing, or sort of understanding that sort of sense of self and how you communicate that in an interview, these sort of skills. That's kind of the best way to go. Is that what the suggestion is? Just so I understand it.
I would definitely say a conversation is the next step, because then you'll kind of prescribe for yourself. Is this a weekly conversation where I move the needle on a couple of the things I want to do? I just pasted, we have a template that I've been sharing with some folks, a spreadsheet template for a job and internship search that I think you could also use for your graduate school application. And this is, again, where I make some people panic with this stuff. There's a lot of tabs in there, all the way from the actual search to the networking, to the skill acquisition, to everything else. I will say, I think people don't understand how important networking is in the graduate admission process. They think it's just boom, get it in. Networking is super important, particularly in PhD. So, but this Google Doc is a good illustration of this is a project tracking challenge more than anything. It's not really how do we make you a great candidate? It's really how do we start the process and then track the process across the search or across the networking or across everything else. So I would start by having that conversation, check out that template. It might help you organize kind of, I like putting it all in one place because it is, you know, the networking for research opportunities, it looks a lot like the networking for PhD programs. So it's good to have it all in one place. But yeah, I would say a conversation next is a great start.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, we are at 1:03. So I'm going to stop recording.